Okay. So, lesson number one, Leanne, don't follow Song Exploder with the lawyer. But I'm also an engineer, and I only get 10 minutes, so you will probably get something useful out of this. Let me start here. Hands up if you recognize the news issue being articulated in this quote. No one? Oh. Most people tend to think it's the FBI and Apple, but dramatic drum roll, it's actually the White House announcing the Clipper chip program in 1993. Clipper was a proposal to create a key escrow system to give law enforcement a backdoor into encrypted email and computer files, which does sound kind of familiar. This talk is supposed to be about the future, so it has to be about the past. Because as Churchill once said, and as Megan Smith reminds us, the farther back you look, the farther forward you can see. So back then, a dream team of crypto wizards banded together to oppose the Clipper chip concept. And what they lacked in diversity, they made up for in hairdos. They were led by this guy named Whitfield Diffie, who is legendary for his work in encryption. And they demanded transparency, they advocated for a more holistic view of privacy and security, and they warned of the increasingly international character of this problem. And then a young computer scientist named Matt Blaze discovered a vulnerability in the chip, effectively crushing its policy potential and probably somebody's job. Why am I telling you this very old story that you probably already know? This is Revenge of the Nerds, and it's awesome, but it's also policy, and not, you will notice, by any lawyers. These are engineers advocating for and acting upon their vision of the future. And this is important because the same issues are actually still at stake 20 years later. 8 years later, in 2012, the Wall Street Journal ran this article showing that Staples was price discriminating between its customers based on where they lived. It's trivial to you guys, but to a lot of people, this was part of a mounting pile of evidence that algorithms invisibly control aspects of our lives, maybe fairly, but maybe not, and that maybe we need policy to guide the algorithms. Which is funny because we still don't have one. At least to my knowledge, no comprehensive national policy governing the accountability and transparency of algorithmic decisions. And this, despite that they are used to decide everything from what dog videos I see on Instagram, this is an actual screenshot of my account, to how people should be sentenced for their crimes. But maybe that doesn't surprise you if you remember that the internet proceeded largely unregulated for its level of importance, and even in 2014, in this decision, the DC Circuit struck down the FCC's first real attempt to create rules for an open internet, which is a concept that we call net neutrality. That same year, another appeals court decided that the Oracle Java API is copyrightable. And although Google later wins at trial on a fair use defense, this ruling still stands, and it illustrates a schism, even within our own community, on the competing values of openness and ownership. So this debate is one we also have to have with ourselves. In early 2015, the FTC started to speak out publicly on this issue of algorithmic transparency. And they warned that they can't scale their investigative approach into unfair and deceptive business practices to meet every possible instance of bias. They need a scalable solution, which means they need tech's help. That's a real thing, because tech is one of the things that helped resurrect the FCC's open internet order. After that first loss and a deluge of feedback, in February of last year, they issued a new set of rules that ban ISPs from blocking, throttling, and paid prioritization of content, and they apply to mobile and fixed broadband. They were considered pretty groundbreaking. But no sooner had the ink dried than US Telecom and a bunch of other companies petitioned the court for a stay and a review of the order. Likewise, another group of tech companies you might recognize, and some associations, intervened against Telecom. The court denied the stay, and so in June of last year, these rules actually went into effect while the case was pending. Pretty cool. Open internet. What the hell does that mean? I don't have enough time to tell you, but I will say, nor am I getting paid enough, that sometimes interpreting policy means using it. So a couple of months later, Twilio and Public Knowledge, who apparently have the same logo designer, petitioned the FCC to classify text message carriers under similar principles to those articulated in the order. And you wonder, like, why is that not the case yet? It's actually an issue that lies unresolved even today. So again, policy is not a spectator sport. It's something that you have to use, and if you occasionally in your life you'll find instances when it will engage you like it or not. In December of last year, 14 people were killed in San Bernardino, California. And in the ensuing standoff that we all know between Apple and the FBI's use of the All Writs Act, not search and seizure, the All Writs Act to mandate a vulnerability in the iPhone, we found ourselves reigniting an all too familiar debate. Could such a precedent undermine the privacy and security of every person in the world? And just as suddenly, an unnamed third party finds a vulnerability, leaving the issue somewhat uncomfortably unresolved. God, that does sound familiar. But things are slightly different. And that guy with the cool hair, I think the thing he got right more than anything else was the increasingly international character of this problem. So, for example, in August of this past year, the European Commission issued the GDPR, this thing, which is probably the single most comprehensive foreign data privacy and security regulation since its predecessor in 1995. The difference here is that it doesn't just apply to EU companies. It applies to any company, pretty much, processing the data of an EU resident, and it goes online in 2018. Time to do some homework. Again, don't have time to explain it to you, but I will tell you, maximum penalties go up to 4% of a company's annual worldwide turnover. Yeah, not good. What's more intimidating about this, I think, is that the EU is over here comprehensively regulating privacy, and we're over here threatening to shut down the government over root DNS management. The headlines on this one are stellar. ICANN jokes. The Senate is also proposing, yes, thank you. The Senate is also proposing to force companies to comply with court orders to decrypt their customers' data. So I think it was 5 days later, a coalition of semi-interested tech companies told the senators that their plan was, quote, unworkable. This is tech company intervening on behalf of policy, but this isn't just about tech. So Megan Smith and her colleagues, I think, have done a really excellent job of trying to focus people, especially on the idea that algorithms have the potential both to identify, but also to engage in discrimination, including in this report. These are algorithms that decide our access to credit, education, employment, and criminal justice. In the same month, May of last year, an award-winning journalist named Julia Angwin published this article where she argued with evidence that criminal sentencing algorithms are biased against black defendants and in favor of those who are white. How many of you are surprised by this outcome? How many of you knew that criminal sentencing algorithms were a thing? Good. For the rest of you, wake up. This is a real thing. And this isn't just tech policy. This is everyone. Sometimes the government can help you out. So the same DC Circuit that struck down that last open internet order upheld the new one in June of this year, which means net neutrality is probably intact. Maybe because we're awaiting the inevitable Supreme Court appeal, and the White House and Congress are fighting about whether the FCC can even enforce its own rules. But what would be a good legal talk without any certainty? And meanwhile, in privacy and security, among many other things, we've decided to form a digital security commission to collaboratively tackle the encryption problem, which is an idea we have definitely never thought of before. Yeah. This, by the way, is the only time it's appropriate for an adult to use Comic Sans in a presentation. Okay. Tongue out of my cheek for the last minute. I actually do think that some things are different. I think we now have the blueprints of an open internet, and this is something that we've talked about for a very long time. It will take a lot of work to put it into place. And I also think that though we've reignited the crypto wars, so to speak, we now find ourselves in a global environment with completely different technology and risks. And I'm also encouraged that we are grappling with the consequences of the power of algorithms and data to control people's lives, for better or for worse. But if you don't think about these issues when you are building these things, other people are not going to fix them for you. So if you remember literally nothing else that I have said, remember this. Policy is not just for lawyers. If you are in here, it's because you're not at the social hackathon. That is a great place to go right now. And you need to show up at the policy table, not to talk. This is not a pitch for law school. Sorry, NYU. We need you to do exactly what you do best, which is design and solve problems. This talk is not about how policy is going to shape your life. It's about how you will be the architects of the future. Thank you.